What if I told you that a modern person, finding themselves in the winter prairie without modern equipment, would not survive even one night? Imagine an endless plain where the icy wind pierces through you at the speed of a train and the temperature drops to levels that cause trees to crack. In this world, there is no central heating, no down comforters from the supermarket, and no concrete walls to protect you from the elements. However, the indigenous peoples of North America lived in these conditions for centuries, and not only did they survive, they slept in comfort that is difficult for us to imagine. Their secret was not to fight nature, but to deeply understand the invisible laws of physics that we have forgotten today. They turned snowdrifts into blankets and icy air into a reliable shield, using techniques honed by millennia of experience and trial and error. Watch the video to the end to learn how ancient survivalists used the science of invisible heat to turn the deadly cold into their ally. What if I told you that everything you believed about heat is wrong? We are used to thinking that clothes or blankets keep us warm, but in fact only our own bodies keep us warm. The task of any material is simply to retain this heat and prevent it from dissipating into the icy space of the surrounding world. The Native Americans of the Great Plains understood this principle long before the advent of modern laboratories and thermal imaging cameras. They realized that the best insulator in the world is not wool or leather, but ordinary air. The main condition was that this air had to remain completely still, trapped in millions of tiny pockets. Their entire survival system was based on creating multiple layers between which the heat emanating from a person would be trapped. It resembled the principle of modern double-glazed windows or thermoses. Only natural materials were used instead of glass and vacuum. Each element of their sleeping quarters was selected to create these air gaps. They did not mindlessly pile mountains of skins on top of themselves, but constructed complex engineering systems. A mistake in this design could cost a life, because a person is most vulnerable to the cold while sleeping. The harsh winter did not forgive carelessness, and any draft that reached the body could cause fatal hypothermia. Therefore, the air inside the dwelling and inside the bed had to be static. They used fur with a thick undercoat, which retained warm air near the skin better than any synthetic material. The structure of the hair of animals living in this climate is itself a hollow tube filled with air. The Indians intuitively used these properties of materials to create a cocoon impervious to the external environment. It is interesting to note that their approach to heat conservation was diametrically opposed to that of Europeans. Europeans tried to heat rooms with huge stoves, burning tons of wood. Indigenous peoples, on the other hand, focused on preserving the microclimate directly around the sleeping person. This was more effective in conditions where fuel had to be obtained through hard labor. They did not heat the space, which cooled down instantly, but themselves. This strategy required special attention to detail and the materials that surrounded them. Ordinary grass, properly dried and woven, became a powerful barrier against the cold. Moss collected in swamps worked like a sponge, absorbing moisture and retaining heat. Even snow, which for us is a symbol of cold, was used by them as a building material for insulation. A dwelling covered with snow became much warmer inside as the snow blocked the wind. It is important to understand that their technologies were available to everyone, but required skill in their manufacture. You couldn't just gather a bunch of leaves and go to sleep, hoping for a miracle. Each layer was laid in a specific sequence to wick moisture away from the body and retain dry heat. Moisture was the main enemy. A wet person in the cold is a dead person. Therefore, materials were selected based on their hygroscopicity and ability to breathe. This philosophy of still air was evident in everything from clothing to housing architecture. They did not try to change the weather or fight the wind with brute force. They allowed the wind to slip past, preserving a precious cocoon of warmth inside. It was the art of gentle resistance to the elements, based on knowledge and observation. Modern tourists and survivalists still use these same principles, calling them the layer theory. However, the ancient inhabitants of the plains perfected this theory to a degree unattainable for many modern enthusiasts. They knew the properties of every plant and the skin of every animal in different seasons of the year. The winter hide of a bison was radically different from the summer hide, and they had to be used differently. This knowledge was passed down from generation to generation, recorded not in books, but in survival skills. Their sleeping systems were modular, allowing layers to be added or removed depending on the temperature. In the most severe frosts, the number of layers increased, creating a matryoshka effect. A person was at the center of this structure, like a precious core generating life. And while a blizzard raged outside, a comfortable tropical temperature was maintained inside this cocoon. We are very interested in hearing your opinion. What do you think about this approach to using natural materials instead of technology? Write about it in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next chapters of the survival story. Are you ready to learn the truth about a dwelling that many consider to be just a tent? A teepee is not just skins stretched over poles, but a complex aerodynamic structure. Many people mistakenly believe that it must be as cold inside such a structure as it is outside. However, when properly installed, a teepee could maintain a comfortable temperature inside even at -30 degrees. The secret lay in a unique ventilation and insulation system that Europeans could not figure out for a long time. A key element of this system was the interior lining, which few people know about. This lining, sometimes called ozan or rosa, was an additional layer of leather or fabric. It was attached to poles inside the dwelling, starting from the ground and rising to human height. There was an air gap between the outer covering of the teepee and this inner wall. It was this gap that played a crucial role in the thermoregulation of the entire structure. Cold air entering from below did not enter the living area, but went into this corridor. Working on the principle of a chimney, this gap created a draft that pulled the smoke from the fire vertically upward. At the same time, the air layer served as a powerful insulator, blocking the cold from the sleeping areas. People sitting or sleeping inside were protected from drafts by a double wall. The interior was heated by the central hearth and retained heat due to the absence of wind. It was an ingenious engineering solution that utilized the laws of convection. In winter, the outer edge of the tire was pressed tightly to the ground and covered with snow or turf. This created a tight seal that prevented air from blowing in from below. The inner lining descended to the ground, often tucking under the sleeping areas. Thus, cold air from the street could not physically reach the sleeping people. It was forced to rise between the walls and exit through the smoke hole. This design allowed the temperature inside to remain tens of degrees higher than outside. While a blizzard might be raging outside, people inside could wear light clothing. The efficiency of the teepee was so high that even a small fire provided enough heat. It was only important to correctly orient the entrance and smoke valves to the wind. Controlling these valves was a separate art that all residents mastered. In addition to thermal insulation, the interior lining protected against condensation and water droplets. Moisture rising from breathing, and the fire settled on the outer skin and dripped down. Thanks to the double walls, this water did not drip on people and things, but drained into the ground. The dwelling was always dry, which was critical for winter survival. Dry air ensured better heat retention in clothing and bedding. The teepee was a mobile home that could be assembled and disassembled in an hour, but in winter it was set up thoroughly, often with the floor dug into the ground. Removing the top layer of soil allowed the geothermal heat of the earth to be used. The ground is always warmer at depth than the air at the surface, and this provided an extra degree of warmth. The walls of the depression were additionally reinforced and insulated. Interestingly, the cone shape also helped to retain heat. Warm air concentrated in the center and at the bottom, where people were, rather than escaping into useless corners. The minimum surface area with maximum volume reduced heat loss through the walls. Winds of any strength flowed around the cone without creating excessive pressure on the structure. This made the teepee the most stable dwelling for open, windy plains. Inside the teepee, the space was strictly organized and sleeping areas were located in the warmest areas. These were usually places along the walls protected by interior cladding. Clothes stacked at the head and feet created additional barriers to the cold. The entire life of the family was centered around the heat source in the center. This created not only physical, but also psychological comfort. The nomads of the plains understood perfectly well that their lives depended on the quality of their shelter. Therefore, tanning hides for coverings and sewing interior linings were sacred crafts. The use of smoke to impregnate the hides made them waterproof and translucent. At night, the light from the hearth turned the teepee into a glowing lantern in the middle of the dark steppe. It was a beacon of warmth and safety in the icy ocean of winter. Why do you think modern tents often lose out to this ancient design in terms of comfort? Want to learn a secret that will change your life and your perception of plants? We are used to walking past marsh plants, considering them useless weeds. But for indigenous peoples, cattail was a real supermarket and a source of unique materials. Its fluff, which ripens in the fall, has phenomenal thermal insulation properties. In terms of its ability to retain heat, it can rival the best goose down. Native Americans use this plant material where we now use synthetic padding or hollow fiber. Cattail fluff consists of thousands of fine fibers that intertwine to create a voluminous structure. This volume is filled with air, which, as we already know, is the main heat retainer. Reed harvesting was an important seasonal activity in which the entire community participated. It was collected in bags, dried, and fluffed up in preparation for the coming winter. It was a free, renewable, and incredibly effective resource. This fluff was used to stuff moccasins, creating a soft and warm layer around the foot. Unlike grass, the fluff did not prickle and took the shape of the foot, filling all the voids. Feet in such padding remained warm even when standing in the snow for a long time. It was the prototype of modern felt insoles or thermal socks. If the down got wet, it could easily be replaced with fresh down. But the main use of cattail was in the creation of sleeping mattresses and pillows. Leather bags were stuffed with this down to make soft and warm feather beds. Sleeping on such a bedding was not only comfortable, but also warm, as it completely insulated from the cold of the ground. Huge reserves of this material allowed the filling to be changed as needed. The cleanliness and hygiene of the sleeping area were maintained by regularly replacing the filling. In addition, cattail down has water-repellent properties due to its natural oils. It does not rot as quickly as hay or straw and absorbs less moisture. This made it an ideal material for conditions where humidity could be a problem. Even in wet weather, a cattail mattress retained its insulating properties. This was critical for joint and lung health. The reeds were not wasted either. They were woven into mats. These mats were laid on the floor of the dwelling, creating a primary layer of insulation from the frozen ground. The weaving was dense to create a rigid and durable base. Several layers of such mats created a reliable floor that could be walked on without shoes. The air chambers inside the stems acted as additional insulation. In some tribes, cattail down was used to insulate the clothing of children and the elderly. It was sewn between two layers of leather to create quilted jackets and blankets. Such clothing was light, did not restrict movement, but kept you warmer than heavy fur coats. It was an ancient analog of a down jacket, created thousands of years before the emergence of the fashion industry. The lightness of the material was important for mobility and comfort. The use of plant materials showed a deep connection between humans and the ecosystem. They did not kill animals for warmth if plants could be used instead. It was a rational approach that preserved the animal population for food. Cattail grew everywhere, so there was no need to hunt it down and risk one's life to obtain it. Saving resources was part of their culture. Surprisingly, this material was also used as a bandage and absorbent. In the context of sleep, this meant that it could absorb sweat, leaving the skin dry. Dry skin loses less heat, which contributed to deeper and more restful sleep. Sleep comfort directly affected daytime activity and the ability to obtain food. Today, we buy expensive camping mats and sleeping bags, spending huge amounts of money. Ancient people found everything they needed in the nearest swamp, simply by knowing the properties of nature. Their technologies were simple, environmentally friendly, and tested by centuries of harsh winters. This knowledge was a real treasure, available to anyone who knew how to observe. Be sure to like this if you are amazed by the ingenuity of ancient people. Guess how long it took to create this unique solution to the problem of cold? Fire was the heart of the home, but keeping an open flame burning all night was wasteful and dangerous. Firewood was scarce on the plains, and no one could afford to burn it just to heat the air. Therefore, the Indians devised ways to preserve the heat of the fire using stones. Stone has a high heat capacity. It takes a long time to heat up, but it also gives off heat for a very long time. This property turned ordinary cobblestones into effective night heaters. Before going to bed, several large stones were heated to a high temperature in a fire. Then these stones were carefully removed, wrapped in skins or old leather, and placed at the foot of the sleeping area. Such a stone battery could give off soft, pleasant heat for 6-8 hours. This was quite enough to survive the coldest part of the night. The risk of burns was eliminated by a thick layer of wrapping. In addition, the heated stones were sometimes buried in the ground under the sleeping area. A layer of earth was placed on top, followed by mats and skins. The earth distributed the heat evenly, and the entire surface of the bed became warm. It resembled a warm floor system, only with a local effect. Sleeping on such a heated platform was incredibly comfortable. Another way to control the fire was to use a long log. Instead of throwing small branches into the hearth, the ends of long, thick logs were placed there. As the logs burned, they were simply pushed to the center of the hearth. This allowed for slow, steady burning without having to get up and chop wood. The fire smoldered all night, providing even heat. The coals left over after the fire burned out were also carefully preserved. They could be sprinkled with ash to prevent them from burning too quickly, but they continued to radiate heat. In the morning, these coals were fanned, and the fire flared up with renewed vigor in a matter of minutes. The ash served as an excellent insulator, trapping the heat inside the pile of coals. Saving effort on lighting a fire was an important part of everyday life. In some cases, special pits for coals were used inside the dwelling. These pits were covered with flat stones or grates, creating a safe source of heat. The air in the teepee was heated by these stones without becoming saturated with acrid smoke. This was important for maintaining the health of the eyes and lungs in a confined space. Clean air contributed to better rest. The stones for heating were chosen with great care. Stones from the river could not be used, as the water inside them could boil and break the stone when heated. Only dry, dense volcanic rocks or sandstone were used. Knowledge of geology was as important a survival skill as hunting. A mistake in choosing a stone could lead to injury. This heating system was completely fireproof when used correctly. The stones did not spark, smoke, or require oxygen to release heat. They were quiet and reliable companions on winter nights. While the elements raged outside, the heated stone created an island of comfort under the blanket. It was a simple physical phenomenon put to use for the benefit of humans. Sometimes stones were also used to dry shoes and clothes. A heated stone was placed inside a wet moccasin, and the moisture quickly evaporated. Dry shoes in the morning ensured that your feet would not freeze during the day. Taking care of equipment was an integral part of the evening ritual. Warm stones saved not only sleep, but also health. Today we use electric heaters and chemical packs, but the principle remains the same. A local heat source is much more effective than trying to heat the whole world around you. Ancient people understood that resources were limited and used them with the utmost wisdom. A stone taken from the ground gave life and returned to nature in the morning. What modern item do you think could replace a heated stone on a hike? The main source of cold for a sleeping person is not the air, but the earth. The earth is an endless heat absorber, capable of draining the life out of anyone who lies on it without protection. The thermal conductivity of soil is dozens of times higher than that of air, and contact with it is deadly. The Indians understood this mechanism perfectly and paid great attention to insulating their sleeping places from the ground. Never under any circumstances did they sleep on the bare ground in winter. The basis of the sleeping system was always a raised platform or a thick layer of insulation. In stationary dwellings, such as dugouts or longhouses, wooden bunks were built. They raised a person half a meter off the floor, creating an air cushion underneath. Cold air, being heavier, accumulated at the bottom near the floor, while warm air rose to the ceiling. The bunks were located in the area where the temperature was most comfortable. In camping conditions, in teepees, they used so-called willow beds. These were portable structures made of willow twigs tied together with tendons. They resembled a hard hammock or a grid raised above the ground on special supports. Skins and mats were laid on top of this grid. This structure was light, durable, and provided excellent ventilation and insulation from below. The willow rods acted as springs, making the bed soft and comfortable. But their main function was to create a gap between the body and the icy ground. Air circulated freely under the bed, preventing moisture from accumulating. The backs of these beds were also woven from willow and hung with leather screens. These screens protected the sleeper's head from drafts blowing through the dwelling. If it was impossible to build a platform, a layer cake was created directly on the ground. First, a thick layer of coniferous branches or dry grass was laid down. This layer provided drainage and an initial air gap. Next came the woven mats made of cattail or reed that we mentioned earlier. Only then were the bison hides laid out with the fur facing up. Bison hides were the perfect final barrier. Their thick skin kept out the cold, and their thick, curly fur created a soft and warm surface. Often, several hides were used, one underneath and another on top. The result was a fur envelope in which a person was completely isolated from the external environment. It was important that the lower layers were dry and did not crumple under the weight of the body. Interestingly, the arrangement of beds in the dwelling was strictly regulated. The places for the hosts and honored guests were at the back of the teepee, opposite the entrance. It was warmest there, and there was less draft from the door flap. The places closer to the exit were occupied by young warriors or less prestigious members of the family. It was a pragmatic hierarchy dictated by the laws of thermodynamics. The use of natural materials required constant renewal of the bedding. Branches and grass compacted over time, losing their insulating properties. Therefore, women regularly changed the lower layers to maintain the effectiveness of the sleeping system. Fresh pine needles also gave off a pleasant aroma, disinfecting the air in the dwelling. Hygiene and warmth went hand in hand. The earth could be a friend if its properties were used correctly. In sunken dwellings, earthen walls retained the heat accumulated during the summer, but the floor always required careful insulation. Understanding how heat exchange with the ground worked was basic knowledge for any inhabitant of the plains. Without this knowledge, survival would have been impossible. This whole complex system of flooring and platforms suggests that comfortable sleep was a priority. A tired, sleep-deprived hunter is a bad hunter. The labor invested in making the bed paid off handsomely during the long winter migrations. It was not a luxury, but a necessity. Are you ready for the shocking truth about the nighttime diet of ancient peoples? In the modern world, we are told that eating at night is harmful, but for Native Americans, it was a matter of life and death. They knew that no amount of fur could warm the body if there was no energy inside. The thermoregulation mechanism requires fuel, and the best fuel for long-term burning is fat. Therefore, before going to bed on cold nights, they always ate foods rich in fats and proteins. This triggered a metabolic process that generated internal heat. The main winter superfood was pemmican. It is a mixture of dried and powdered bison meat mixed with melted fat and berries. Pemmican was an incredibly high-calorie and compact product. A piece the size of a fist could provide an adult man with energy for a whole day. Eaten before bedtime, it worked like a slow-burning coal in the body's furnace. Digesting fatty foods is an energy-intensive process accompanied by heat release. This heat, spreading through the blood throughout the body, warmed the limbs and internal organs. The Indians intuitively felt this connection between food and warmth. A hungry person freezes much faster because the body has no resources for heating. A full stomach warms better than a fur coat. This principle was well known to them. In addition to pemmican, they used thick meat broths and soups. Hot liquids quickly warmed them from the inside, and fat provided a long-term supply of energy. In severe frosts, the diet shifted toward higher fat content. They valued animal fat more than the meat itself. Fat was the currency of survival in the winter steppe. It is important to note that this diet was justified by extreme physical exertion in cold weather. Under conditions of constant stress from low temperatures, the body burns calories at a frantic rate. It was practically impossible to gain excess weight. Everything went into the furnace for heating. Of course, such a diet would not be suitable for a modern office worker. But in terms of survival, it was the only right decision. They tried to drink water in moderation before bed so as not to wake up at night. Leaving the warm cocoon and going out into the cold was stressful for the body and led to a large loss of heat. Therefore, fluid balance was also part of the nighttime rest strategy. They knew how to listen to their bodies and give them exactly what they needed. This approach to nutrition was part of a general culture of treating food as a sacred gift. Animals gave their lives so that people could live, and every calorie was used with gratitude. Nothing was thrown away, especially valuable fat. It was stored in special bladders and used as a strategic reserve. Even during periods of famine, They tried to save a piece of fat for the night. This could save them from hypothermia during sleep, when metabolism slows down. Children and the elderly were fed first, as their thermoregulation is weaker. Caring for the family's nutrition was the main task of hunters and women. Thus, they kept warm not only from the outside with skins and fire, but also from the inside. It was a comprehensive approach where biology and physics worked in unison. The body became an autonomous furnace capable of sustaining life in the most extreme conditions. And the fuel for this furnace was simple but effective food. Do you think modern humans could stick to such a diet without harming their health? Native American clothing was not just a set of items, but a well-thought-out multi-layered system that was not completely removed at night. On the coldest nights, they went to sleep in a base layer of clothing that served as additional insulation. The main material was softly tanned deer or elk skin. It was breathable yet windproof, creating an ideal microclimate. The secret lay in a special tanning method that made the skin velvety. Traditional clothing did not have buttons or zippers, which could let in the cold. Everything was fastened and tied, allowing the fit to be adjusted. Shirts and leggings were loose-fitting, creating an air layer between the fabric and the body. This layer retained the warm air heated by the body. If the clothing was too tight, it restricted blood circulation and caused the wearer to feel cold. Bison capes or robes played a special role. These were whole hides with thick winter fur, which were worn as raincoats during the day and used as blankets at night. An important detail was that the fur was usually worn on the inside, against the body. This created the air pockets we talked about in the first chapter. The leather side on the outside protected against wind and snow. Moccasins were often taken off at night to dry, but special soft fur sleeping socks were worn. The feet had to rest and breathe, but remain warm. If the feet froze, it was impossible to warm up completely. Keeping the extremities warm was a priority, so rabbit or beaver fur was used, which was especially soft and warm. Fur hats or hoods could also be left on at night. A huge amount of heat escapes through the head, so protecting the head was important. People often covered their heads with a blanket, leaving only a small opening for breathing. This created a closed circuit where breathing warmed the space under the blanket. Clothes were decorated with fringe not only for beauty. Fringe helped to drain water faster if the clothes got wet. The water rolled down the straps without being absorbed into the main fabric. Fringe also broke up the silhouette and helped with camouflage. But in winter, its moisture-wicking function was more important. Dry clothes or warm clothes. Women's dresses and men's shirts were long, covering the lower back and hips. This protected vital organs from the cold when bending over and moving. When lying down, this length allowed for tighter wrapping. The belt that was tied around the waist created an additional barrier to prevent warm air from escaping from under the clothing. The skins were treated with animal brains and smoked. Smoking gave the skin water-repellent properties and prevented it from hardening after getting wet. The soft leather fit comfortably around the body without creating stiff folds that could cause pressure during sleep. It was a high-tech material for its time. The ability to dress for the weather was instilled from an early age. Excessive clothing could cause sweating, which was dangerous in the cold. A lack of clothing led to freezing. The Indians masterfully balanced this line, adding or removing layers. Their wardrobe was perfectly adapted to their living conditions. Ultimately, their clothing was an extension of their bodies. It did not interfere, did not restrict movement, and provided reliable protection. Sleeping in such clothing was natural and safe. It was a second skin, gifted by nature and crafted by human hands. For most of us, snow is associated with cold, but for the inhabitants of the North, it was an excellent building material. Freshly fallen snow consists of 90–95% air trapped between ice crystals. This makes it one of the best natural insulators. Peoples living in subarctic regions and northern plains actively use this property. They literally covered themselves with snow to keep warm. If a snowfall caught a traveler in an open field, he could dig a hole in a snowdrift. It was important to make the entrance below the level of the bed so that warm air would not escape. In such a snow shelter, called a quinze, or simply a snow cave, the temperature could stay around 0 degrees. Compared to -40 outside, it was really warm. Body heat quickly warmed up the small space. Snowbanks were deliberately piled up around stationary dwellings, such as tipis or wigwams. This snow belt protected the bottom of the dwelling from being blown away by the wind. The snow was compacted to create a monolithic wall that no blizzard could penetrate. It was additional free insulation provided by nature itself. The earthen houses built by some sedentary tribes, such as the Mandan or Hidatsa, were also covered with a thick layer of snow in winter. These houses, half buried in the ground with sod roofs, turned into real heat bunkers under the snow. The snow on the roof acted as a blanket, trapping heat inside the large room. It was so warm inside these houses that people walked around half naked. The danger of snow shelters was the possibility of internal walls becoming covered in ice. Breathing caused the walls to become covered in a layer of ice, which prevented air from passing through. Therefore, it was essential to make a ventilation hole. A small hole in the ceiling saved people from suffocation. Knowledge of these subtleties separated life from death. Snow was also used to protect food supplies. Meat was buried in the snow, where it was stored as if in a freezer, but was protected from predators and temperature fluctuations. The stable temperature inside the snowdrift kept the food fresh. It was a natural refrigerator and storage facility. Interestingly, clothes and shoes had to be dry before entering a snow shelter. If you brought snow into a warm place, it would melt and wet your things. Therefore, before entering the dwelling, the snow was carefully brushed off with special bone or wooden beaters. This was an important ritual that preserved the microclimate of the house. Sound was muffled perfectly in snow shelters. Inside, there was absolute silence, protected from the howling wind outside by a thick layer of snow. This silence helped people calm down and regain their strength. Psychological comfort in such conditions was no less important than physical comfort. The feeling of security allowed people to sleep soundly. Thus, snow was not an enemy, but a resource. One only needed to know how to work with it, not to fight it, but to use its structure. This paradox, warming oneself with cold, is one of the most striking examples of human adaptation to the environment. Those who understood the nature of snow lived in warmth. In harsh conditions, individualism was an unaffordable luxury. Survival depended on the group, and this also applied to sleeping at night. Native Americans practiced communal sleeping, where the whole family or group of hunters slept huddled together. This was the most effective way to conserve heat by combining the power of several organisms. The heat loss of one person was compensated by the heat of their neighbor. Sleeping places were arranged so that people lay side by side, covered with large shared skins. Children and the elderly, as the most vulnerable members of the group, were usually placed in the center. Adult men and women lay down at the edges, creating a living shield. This huddle allowed them to survive nights when the temperature dropped to critical levels. Even the layout of the settlement worked to preserve the overall warmth. The tipis were placed in a circle or semicircle, with the entrances often facing east, away from the prevailing westerly winds. The dwellings themselves were quite close to each other, breaking the wind gusts and creating a calmer zone inside the camp. It was a collective architecture of protection. Inside the teepee, each person's place was determined by tradition, but in winter these rules could be adjusted for warmth. Guests were placed in the warmest places, demonstrating hospitality and care. The exchange of warmth was also a form of social interaction that strengthened bonds within the tribe. The feeling of togetherness was literal. The dogs that lived in the camp also played their part. On the coldest nights they were allowed into the dwelling. The dogs lay at people's feet or along their backs, acting as living hot water bottles. Their body temperature is higher than that of humans, which made them excellent sources of heat. The symbiosis between humans and animals was mutually beneficial. It is important to note that humidity increased in cramped conditions. Therefore, ventilation became even more important. Smoke from the hearth and the breath of many people had to be removed without cooling the dwelling. The ability to balance heat retention and fresh air was a collective skill. This was monitored by the older women, the guardians of the hearth. The psychological aspect of sleeping together should not be underestimated either. In the darkness and cold, when wolves and the wind howled outside, the presence of living people nearby was reassuring. Fear receded, giving way to a feeling of security. Restful sleep was the key to the mental health of the group. During military campaigns, scouts often slept in pairs, covered by a single blanket. This was called brothers under the blanket. This practice created a deep emotional bond between the warriors. They trusted each other with their lives and their warmth. This brotherhood was stronger than steel. Collective warmth is a metaphor for the entire way of life of indigenous peoples. No one survived alone. Warmth was a shared resource that was divided among everyone. And it was this unity that allowed them to thrive where a lone individual would have been doomed. Unity was the main source of warmth. Physical training and equipment played a huge role, but psychological resilience was no less important. From childhood, Native Americans accustomed themselves to the cold, perceiving it not as suffering, but as a natural part of the world. Hardening was part of their upbringing. Morning swims in the icy river were the norm for many tribes, even in winter. This trained their blood vessels and willpower. They knew how to control their perception of cold. Shivering is a protective reaction of the body, an attempt to warm up, but it consumes a lot of energy. Experienced warriors and hunters knew how to relax even in the cold, suppressing shivering with willpower. This allowed them to conserve energy and maintain clarity of mind. Panic in the cold kills faster than the frost itself. Sleeping in the cold required a special mindset. You had to be able to fall asleep quickly and deeply, taking advantage of every opportunity to rest. But at the same time, you had to remain alert enough to wake up if the fire went out or the weather changed. This borderline state between sleep and wakefulness was a skill honed over years. Respect for the elements was the basis of their worldview. They did not complain about the weather or curse the frost. Complaints were considered a sign of weakness and a waste of energy. They accepted the world as it was and adapted to it. This stoic attitude helped them endure hardship with dignity. Rituals and prayers also helped them cope with the difficulties of winter. The belief that guardian spirits would help them survive the cold gave them moral strength. Winter evenings were a time for telling stories and legends. These stories distracted them from the cold and taught them wisdom. The ability to endure discomfort was a measure of strength of spirit. A man who could sleep on the snow and not complain was held in high esteem. A woman who could keep the hearth warm all night was the backbone of the family. These qualities were valued above beauty or wealth. Adaptation to the cold was not only physiological, but also mental. They knew that winter was finite, that spring would inevitably follow. This understanding of the cyclical nature of time gave them hope. Patience was the main weapon against the long winter. This allowed them not only to survive, but to live through winter with dignity, in relative comfort, in harmony with nature and one another, recognizing dependence on nature and the need to balance work, rest, and fellowship. Ultimately, their secret was harmony. Harmony with nature, with their tribe, and with themselves. They did not hide from the world behind thick walls, but lived within it. And this world, even harsh and cold, gave them everything they needed to live. The history of the survival of the indigenous peoples of North America is a lesson in incredible ingenuity and wisdom. Without access to modern technology, they created life support systems whose effectiveness is still astonishing today. From the use of air pockets to the control of metabolism, they masterfully applied the laws of physics and biology. Their experience proves that comfort depends not so much on things as on knowledge and the ability to use them. The main thing is not how much heat you can generate, but how intelligently you conserve it. Ancient peoples elevated this to an art form, turning the deadly cold into a familiar backdrop to their lives. They showed us that humans are capable of adapting to any conditions if they are attentive to the world around them. Which of these ancient survival methods would you risk using on a modern winter hike? Or maybe you know other forgotten ways to keep warm without electricity. Write your ideas in the comments. We are very interested in your opinion. And be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new journeys into the history of everyday life.